So I have some good news and some bad news. First, the good news. You guys, you, will get to be some of the first people to be informed about the bad news. The bad news is we have a potential problem breeding in the background. And that, and I'll just come out and say it, is a bug problem. Now, it's not here yet, well it is, but the real problem is on the way. I believe that when you are faced with a potential threat or challenge, it is probably good to know everything you can about it. The weird thing about all this is that I'm about to talk about something that we have looked at recently, and that is the propagation of eating insects. And you have mostly seen this done with things like mealworms and grasshoppers or crickets. Well, friends, it turns out we are going to have plenty to eat after all, because there is a new type of cricket that may be headed to a town near you. What the heck is the latest Hudson Valley monstrosity? Spider crickets. What the heck are they? I've heard of spiders, I've heard of crickets, but until a few days ago, I had never heard of spider crickets. And I'd never seen one either. I was okay without knowing, but now it's too late. Apparently, spider crickets are the latest insect that everybody's talking about. And we've got them right here in the Hudson Valley. I personally know somebody who found one in her Hudson Valley home. I remember when I was very young, I lived in a small house out in the rural areas of Virginia. And the house my family moved into had these spider crickets, among other critters. And there weren't many of them, but when you come across one, they do resemble a spider. When you go to catch it or squish it, they jump. I just thought they were some type of jumping spider. Trust me, they are not something you want in your house. So, we've talked about this before, the great bug invasion, right? And we've seen these types of occurrences in previous years leading up to this, with locusts, stink bugs, cicadas, and this year is apparently the year of the cricket. And at least here in the US, there are two major species to look out for: the spider cricket and the Mormon cricket. They are already dealing with these swarms out west big time. We know that a plague is defined as a contagious disease, right? But a plague is also defined as a large swarm of insects. That is why the plague horseman brings both disease and bugs. This was published by the Farmer's Almanac, July 7th, 2022. Spider crickets are real, and here's why you don't want them in your home. These critters may try to make their way into your home this fall. Here's how to keep these pests out without harsh chemicals. What are spider crickets? These critters go by lots of names, but spider cricket is one of the most common because they resemble spiders. Their official name is Rhaphidophoridae. They're also known as criters, sprickets, cave vetta, cave crickets, camelback crickets, or camel crickets. And because they look so much like spiders, they're definitely scary to anyone who's not a fan. Worse, they often congregate in large groups, which can make for a terrifying sight if you happen to enter a place where a few are roaming around. But these bugs, even if they are creepy and crawly, are for the most part harmless. However, you don't want them in your home because of the damage they can do. At first glance, these spider crickets do look like spiders, which is part of their defense. And if you get too close to them, they have the habit of jumping at you to scare you as another defense. Which is pretty creepy to know that this cricket is programmed to jump toward you instead of away from you like a grasshopper would. They don't have fangs or teeth, so they can't bite you, but they do have mandibles, so they can definitely gnaw on you if they land on you. When you are able to get close enough to identify it, you will notice, unlike spiders, they have very long antennae and only 6 legs, with the hind legs, of course, being much larger than the others. They don't have wings, and they have a hunchback shape. They can also get up to 2 inches long, whereas the Mormon cricket can get up to 3 inches long. Now, these spider crickets don't chirp. They just make noise with their jumping movements. The Farmer's Almanac describes it as the sound of popcorn popping, because you have a few of these crickets jumping around and hitting the floor. The way these crickets attract mates is with smell. And see, the thing is, a regular house cricket, no problem. If you come across one of these spider crickets, I can almost guarantee you, even if you were told 1,000 times that this is just a cricket, you'd probably still treat it like a spider. When I was a kid, I think I ran into them maybe 3 or 4 times when we first moved into that house in Virginia, Chesterfield County. And I always remembered those things and how I found one in the bathtub. Those crickets were killed. There was no catching them and letting them back outside. Nope. They were made an example of. I mean, it was the country. There were huge black and yellow garden spiders in the yard, along with frogs and snakes. We lived right next to a creek with a bunch of fruit trees. I think they were mostly pear trees. And so, yeah, it was an experience. If you live in the U.S., they can be found throughout the country. So can Mormon crickets. And Mormon crickets are the ones that can swarm in the millions, if not billions. You can normally find spider crickets in the forest and in the caves, but with the weather and with the heating up of the earth from the inside, it is forcing more critters to surface. And that spills over into people's homes because these pests typically do end up in people's homes by accident. They're just attracted to dark, damp places like basements in the summer and fall seasons. Now, in the past, I used to raise crickets and mealworms. I had a bearded dragon to feed. And in my experience raising these things, if you don't have a garage or outdoor place to keep them, they stink. That's why people prefer to raise the worms instead of raising crickets that jump all over the place and stink up the place as well. From what I understand, these spider crickets like to congregate in numbers in basements, crawl spaces, garages, any place you would typically find insect pests. The biggest problem with these crickets is that they like to gnaw on things people have around the house. They'll chew on fabric, leaving holes in your clothes, rugs, carpets, cardboard. They can also be cannibalistic. They can be a problem for pets as well if your animals decide they want to crunch on some crickets. They could cause an upset stomach. Folks, don't feed your dog crickets. Despite what they say about it having health benefits, look, a dog's diet is not crickets. Now, if your dog is out in the yard and it decides it wants to eat a bug or two, no big deal. But dogs eat meat, bones, and stomachs. Dogs aren't lizards either. Do you see how far these people are willing to go with this insect protein? Trust me, that's what they are going to be telling you, that it's good for you. Poor doggy. Let me ask you something, folks. With all this talk about us eating these things like locusts, grasshoppers, and crickets, how do you gut a grasshopper? Do you slice it open and remove the intestine and feces? Or does it all get ground up and mixed in with the meal? I can't be the only one considering these things. You know, there was a movie that Netflix put out called The Swarm. And they always have some agenda to push that you can see coming from a mile away. This is what they are known for, agenda flicks. This movie, The Swarm, is about a single mom who breeds locusts for protein. She starts having trouble with getting them to reproduce. She's having trouble finding buyers at the price they want. So listen to this. This lady gets offended when she finds out that one of her buyers just wants to feed his animals with the stuff. And she gets all offended like, "Oh, my locust meal is only fit for humans. How dare you feed my locust chunks to birds?" Which, by the way, are what birds eat. Anyway, if you're creeped out by bugs, you probably don't want to watch this movie, especially if you don't want to see a macro high definition shot of locust shedding its skin and eating its own skin, close-ups of cannibalism. What type of energy has to be running through a creature that makes it want to cannibalize other locusts and or itself? Keep in mind, food carries energy, folks. What type of cannibal energy are they trying to feed to people? Are you guys starting to get it? Anyway, there's a scene in the movie where she says, "Pretty soon the whole planet will be starving, but you're all too dumb to notice." Meaning the solution is to eat bugs. What creeps me out about all this is she has an accident inside the locust tent, and these locusts get a taste for human blood. So this psycho decides she's going to feed them by sticking her cut up arm inside the tent. I kid you not. This is Netflix. Later on, she finds out the locusts have been laying eggs all over the place because the human blood somehow gave them super egg-laying abilities. You see where this is going? You guys have seen the Little Shop of Horrors, right? I mean, if Disney is the king of pushing agendas in films, Netflix is its queen. They needed to have that Talking Heads song playing in the background while watching this thing. If you are easily disturbed by bugs, do not watch this film. That and blood, because there's both. So Psycho Lady, see, I don't know if she is psycho or just stupid. She's been sneaking into the locust tent at night, cutting up her arm with a knife to feed her locusts. Like, she never heard of a needle and syringe. She's in the tent crying and suffering while these things are eating her arm alive. Later on, she's in the bathtub with the water running, crying and shaking. I mean, she figures it out later on, but come on. From there, things get all types of crazy, where she, of course, has to find ways to feed these locusts blood, wherever she can find it, even if it means stripping down to her underwear and letting the locusts have at it. That's what she's going to do. Spoilers, by the way, folks. So if you don't want this movie spoiled, you can go check it out and come and watch the rest of this later. So, of course, these locusts start eating people. The habitats she built are set on fire to kill the locusts. They escape and chase down her daughter. But the woman ends up drowning almost all the locusts by cutting her hand and getting them to attack her instead of her daughter. The ending was just lazy awful. So, now what is happening with Mormon crickets? Biblical swarms of cannibalistic insects in the West spark a push to fight back. Farmers and government officials are battling an explosion of cannibalistic insects ravaging crops from Montana to Nevada in an effort to save livelihoods and land. Mormon crickets are not new to Oregon. Native to western North America, their name dates back to the 1800s when they ruined the fields of Mormon settlers in Utah. But amidst drought and warming temperatures, conditions favored by the insects, outbreaks across the West have worsened. Now, did you guys hear anything about this? Interesting, right? On top of everything else already. That's all we need, something else to reduce the food supply. Isn't it crazy? You see how the plague and famine go together? Oregon made efforts to invest $500 million to suppress the Mormon cricket plagues. We have August coming up, and I have a feeling it is going to get very buggy. You have spider crickets in the east and Mormon crickets in the west. So that covers the U.S. pretty well. Let me tell you how bad it is. Many of you have probably heard that farmers are being paid not to farm. That is not a conspiracy theory. You see, farmers typically carry insurance, and the insurance companies put into the contracts a prevent planting clause where the farmer, for insurable reasons, chooses not to plant crops. For example, if the land is too wet or too dry to plant seeds, they have the option of not planting any seeds and are able to claim the insurance money as a result of choosing that option. Many farmers here have already taken that option, which means once the farmers get paid, they can't plant any crops because that would be similar to a false claim, right? So that's how that works in a nutshell. We've already seen what the weather has done to farmland this year, not to mention the loss of cattle and poultry. Many have taken the prevent planting option due to horrible growing conditions. Now, some farmers were able to grow crops, but the weather created the right conditions for biblical swarms of crickets to plague the entire region from Nevada to Montana. We are talking in some areas about 200 crickets per square yard. They had to bulldoze them off the roads because they were becoming too dangerous for drivers as they drove over them, crushing them and making the roads slicker. And worst of all, the crickets are eating everything there is. The UK has cut food production. Iraq cut the water irrigation by 50%. There are swarms of locusts in Africa. One of the largest exporters of food, Brazil, is going into their spring season soon, and we will have to see how that goes as the grains they are growing now, the percentage is down. The thing about these crickets and other bugs and emerging, they aren't going anywhere until the weather changes or until they die of old age, about 2 to 3 months. So they're here till the winter. They don't do well in weather over 100 degrees, and they tend to go dormant at temperatures below 55 degrees. Just to give you an idea of how long they could be hanging around, eating up everything, having sex all around us. Females can mate up to 40 times with one male, and on occasion steps out of that relationship for some side action. And sometimes they eat the eggs they lay. It's disgusting. Is that what you want in your home? Cricket orgies? Oh yeah, I want to hear something that's interesting as all of this is going on. Guess what argument is being raised by certain people in the scientific community? They are now trying to push the idea that they have now confirmed that insects feel pain and therefore should be entitled to have specific rights that prevents harm to them. So you know how people say they wouldn't hurt a fly? Well, does this mean now you may get into trouble for hurting one? Folks, I have quite a few crazy things to discuss for the remainder of this week. I hope that I can get through all of it sooner than later. It's important that we keep up to date and continue to prepare for what may be on its way for the coming fall season. That's all for now. Stay tuned as there is more to come. Be sure to visit woodwardentertainment.com and the Woodward Entertainment Store. You can follow me on Instagram at JAEWoodward. Everyone have a great evening, and as always, stay awake, stay aware, stay safe, and I'll talk to you all soon.